I guess what I wanted to talk in this video was, how you think Barca finished the 2025 year. Um, because it is the end of the year, right? And also we can talk a little bit about the Villarreal game, with the last game of the year. Um, and maybe we can also talk a little bit about some of the players because I know that, for example, Lamine Yamal has received a lot of criticism, and I guess because they're comparing him to last year, they're saying that he's not the same anymore. But an interesting stat is that he actually has more goals by this time in December than he did last year in December. So that's something to think about. But anyways, I guess we can start with the Villarreal game, which is the most recent one. Um, what do you think about that game? How did you see Barca, going into 2026? Because I do think that Barca have improved a lot since the Clásico loss to Real Madrid.
Yeah, I think they have, dude. But I also believe that Barcelona are still struggling. I think Barcelona are still struggling, and especially in defense. And Barcelona seems to struggle a lot when Pedri is in there. I think we've seen it time in and time out. I think Barcelona are also struggling to gain their rhythm and their full potential of, maybe we go and compare Barca to the way they were playing last season, for example. And I think you mentioned that last season as well, where you said that, sometimes the players, they kind of go through a honeymoon stage with the new coach, the new ideas, they kind of want to prove themselves. Um, so regards to the Villarreal game, bro, I saw Barcelona still struggling. It's still not a convincing win. You get me? And I think that Barcelona have been pretty lucky that under Xabi Alonso, Real Madrid have also not been pretty much kicking off good. And the Clásico, of course, before the Clásico, Barcelona they were struggling, dude. And then
Yeah,
they lose the Clásico. Then they pretty much kind of gain momentum there. Madrid go downhill. So yeah, of course, good for Barcelona. But in terms of just to kind of answer your question regarding the Villarreal, still not convincing to me. And I think that in the Champions League, if Barcelona want to get far, they need to improve a lot, dude.
yeah, I do agree that I think mostly in defense they don't look as convincing, as we would want them to look. But um, I do think that there is a lot of positives that we can get from how Barca finished the year 2025. And I guess if since we were touching on the defense, we can talk a little bit about the defense because I do think that now that Gerard Martin is playing as a center back, I
Hmm.
think that's something that we can hold on to. That now I think Flick has sort of has found his defense. Because at the beginning of the season, this season, he was trying players left and right. He was trying Eddie Garcia, Araujo, um, Kubarsi on the playing as a left center back, right? Kubarsi will look more exposed. It was kind of chaotic, but I think now Flick has found the defense that he wants to play with, which is Balde, Gerard Martin, Kubarsi, and Kunde, right? That's the starting defense. So I think that's a positive thing, and I would want to say that even though they obviously they're still not convincing, 100% convincing in defense, I would like to add that they look a lot more better than they did before Gerard Martin was playing as a center back. Because I think before Gerard Martin was playing as a center back, Barca, any team, dude, was scoring one or two goals against them. Any team, even in the Liga, they were scoring one or two goals against them. But ever since Gerard Martinez has been playing at center back, Barca have been able to keep some clean sheets, you know. And then also, having Joan Garcia back as goalkeeper has helped a lot as well. So, um, yeah, I think they're not fully convinced, especially today. I think against the Villarreal game, for example, I think Barca, um, they look more exposed than usual, and that just kind of tells you how much Pedri is missed when he's not there. When Pedri's not playing, bro, as a starting, as a starting midfielder for Barca, you can see how Barca's defense and control of the game, it takes a huge,
Declines.
huge effect into it. Yeah, yeah. So, I think because Pedri was not there, maybe we kind of saw it a little bit more like, how Barca were, maybe at the beginning of the season where they were just messing up in defense, right, coming up from the back, losing a lot of balls and etc. But yeah, I think, like I said, I don't think it's 100% convincing. I still think that Barca, if they were to face, like, for example, PSG, Chelsea again, right? Um, Bayern Munich, I do think that their defense will struggle. but I am optimistic and I am looking forward to see how this defense that Flick is playing with right now can do, next year, bro, and especially in important matches like the Champions League, for example.
You know what, dude? I think in the Champions League, Barcelona is going to struggle. I'm going to go out and say that this year and in the Champions League, Barcelona is going to pretty much struggle against the top teams. When I
Yeah.
mean top teams, bro, we already know, like you said, PSG, Man City, Liverpool, Bayern, Chelsea, even Inter. If they have to face those teams, bro, I can see Barcelona struggling. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at Barcelona's defense in La Liga, and obviously, going back to what you said about Flick using Gerard Martin and Kubarsi, Kunde, and Balde, the one player that I keep telling you that for me it's not convincing a defense at all so far since he's come back from injury is Balde. Balde gets way too exposed on that flank. I know that he goes up a lot, he tries to create, but sometimes he's not even creating. And the reason why I tell you that is because the difference between Kunde and Lamine Yamal, when they connect, they create. But we sometimes don't see that between Balde and Rafinha, bro. We don't see them creating. And I think a lot has to do with Balde. I'm not gonna go too deep into Balde, but I think that for me, all I'm gonna say regarding Balde's form is that it's not too convincing, and he gets way too exposed on that flank. And so with that being said, I think in the Champions League, bro, if Barcelona this season, I think it's gonna be tough for them unless obviously they change and the players improve. Of course, anything is possible. We're only in the beginning stages of the Champions League, right? Same thing could have been said about PSG last season, and look, triple winners. They won the six cups under Luis Enrique. They joined Bayern and Barcelona. As the only two clubs to have done so. Three cups now with them. So I want to see how it kind of does go. I want to give them. I want to be optimistic, like you said. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they can improve. But so far, if we go based off right now, Barcelona's form, it's not just the defense, bro. It's just the forward. I know Rafinha just came back, and Rafinha does a lot to help Barcelona. But sometimes we've me and you have talked about Barcelona without a proper striker. You really think that they can go ahead and make it far in the Champions League, dude? I mean, maybe they can, maybe they can't. But so far, I don't think so, dude. I can see Barcelona being good in the Liga, bro, and I think a lot has to do with the fact that Madrid is also going into that transition period with Xabi Alonso. But in the Champions League, bro, you yourself have said it. Sometimes the defense wins you the games. You have to be really top in defense. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
That is true because in the Champions League it's different, and mm, some games are won by small margins. So, and the little mistake in defense can cost you, right? So, yeah, I obviously, yeah, I do think that the Barca were to come up against, like, let's say, Bayern Munich, Chelsea, PSG, maybe even City, to be
Yeah.
honest. I do think that they will struggle, especially against Arsenal. They,
Oh, I even forgot about Arsenal, bro. For me, that's crazy. I forgot about Arsenal. For me, Arsenal are top contenders in the
yeah.
Champions League.
So yeah, so I think that they will struggle against those teams, but in the league, I do think that they have enough to even win the league because Real Madrid don't
Yeah.
look any convincing at all whatsoever. So, but yeah, and also an interesting fact is that and I was talking to you about it earlier is that um interestingly, people sometimes, they say, oh, yeah, are Barcelona ever going to get back to how they were last season? But interestingly, last season, by the end of 2024, Barca had less points in the league than they do now. Interestingly, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then a lot of people have also been complaining about Lamine Yamal. Um, and interestingly, he has more goals right now towards the end of 2025 than he did in the end of 2024 last year. And that's with him being injured and he had a couple of games off this season. So,
Yeah.
sometimes I think that's because that's how we are, bro. As fans, when we see a team doing something, we're waiting for what's next and what's the next level and what are you gonna do after, right? We forget about, those small little details. And let's also not forget that I remember last year by the end of 2024, Barca, if I'm not mistaken, bro, they lost a 7-point lead that they had with against Real Madrid. and I think Real Madrid finished the year 2024 on top of the league. And it was after the Clasico win that Barca just, I think it was for like about a month and a half, where they couldn't win games. So, I think Barca perhaps maybe we're seeing them leave that behind at the beginning of the season, like leading up to the Clasico and maybe the Chelsea game. I'm hoping that maybe that's the little bad period, that they have or they're gonna have this season. And hopefully, we can see what they did at the beginning of this year, next year, starting in 2026. Because remember, at the beginning of 2025, Barca went on a good run of winning games. I remember they slaughtered Real Madrid 5-2 in the Spanish Super Cup earlier in this year in January, and after that they won. I forget how many games they went unbeaten at the beginning of 2025. So hopefully, they can pick up this momentum. Hopefully, they can increase the momentum, and maybe they can have a good run starting next year, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but you know what, dude? I will tell you though, sometimes I think that that's the reason why sometimes obviously stats are important. I'm not gonna say they're not, but sometimes I think that sometimes we don't focus on the stats for that same reason, bro. Because yes, Lamine Yamal has scored more goals than last season. Yes, Barcelona have more points that they did last season around this time around. But I will go ahead and say that Lamine Yamal was playing a lot better last season around this time around, and so will Barcelona as a whole team, right? Of course, maybe they had less points like you mentioned, but in terms of gameplay, I think that Barcelona were playing a lot better, dude. I think they just looked a little bit more convincing. I'm not gonna go ahead and say there's a big difference. I think a lot has to do with the drop of, Inigo Martinez not being there, of course. Team looked more energized.
But I was gonna tell you, remember though that um uh, by the end of 2024, so we're talking about around the same time this year, right? 1 year ago, by the end of 2024.
Mhm.
That's when Barca were losing a lot of games, dude, towards the end of the year. I think
They
Barca
were
looked good. I think Barca looked good. And I
hot
remember,
teams.
yeah, I think Barca looked good up to the Clasico because they beat Bayern Munich that same week, 4-0, and then they went and they slaughtered the Real Madrid. But after the Clasico winner against Real Madrid in October of 2024, Barca went downhill.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of games, I remember, and they lost the lead. I don't think that they look better around the same time last year than they do now. I think if you analyze it, it was probably about the same. The only difference was that last year they won the big games.
That's what I was gonna tell you. I think that
Yes, and I think that's the difference. The difference is that, for example, they beat Bayern Munich, they beat Real Madrid, right? And this year they lost to Real Madrid, they lost to Chelsea, they lost to PSG.
yeah.
So perhaps that is a difference right there.
And I mean, last year, they were struggling to beat Atletico de Madrid, and this season around, they did beat Atletico de Madrid, of course. I think that
Yeah.
Barcelona they look
Mhm.
convincing, is in the against Atletico de Madrid, against like how you mentioned, right? Chelsea, PSG, and Real Madrid are the three you can say biggest tests that Barcelona has had this season, including Atletico de Madrid, right? You could say four of those tests, Barcelona fell three. you know, um, and we can even go a little step further, bro. And the way they played against Club Brugge, the way they play against Olympiacos, those matches, bro, Barcelona were just struggling, and so for me, that's where I go based off. Not just, of course, they didn't win any of the um big games as much as they did last season, maybe, but even against smaller like teams, you can say Barcelona have been struggling, dude. Pedri was injured, De Jong was injured. Lewandowski has been kind of like, injured, of course. Joan Garcia was injured.
Mhm.
We talked about this, really going, through the same thing that Xavi did in his second season. But if you ask me, I mean, like I said, I'm optimistic, bro. I think that Barcelona can maybe change it around, but I do think that they do need to work a little harder, in my opinion, bro.
So let's say what rating would you give Barca for the year of 2025? This is like
I,
going from January of 2025
yeah,
to December of 2025.
I'll give it my 8, and the reason why is because for me, an 8, because Barcelona have failed to pretty much beat the big teams, and that includes Real Madrid, Chelsea, and PSG this season, right? And I also give them an 8 at the same time because I feel that they were able to kind of come back, right?
But
And
we're talking about January though. So January to December. Remember
yeah,
January they beat Real Madrid 5-2
I'll
for
still give
the
him an 8. I'll
Spanish.
still give him an 8 because for me,
Look,
the Spanish Super Copa, bro, it's like a
no, but it wasn't.
preseason game, dude.
But it wasn't just that though. They beat them in the Spanish Super Cup. Then they beat them in the final of the Copa del Rey,
Yeah.
and then they also beat them in the league, the 4-3 at the Camp Nou. Well, not the Camp Nou, but at the other stadium. This was
Well,
at the beginning.
let's go more based off on this season then.
You
Let's just say this season,
know,
the
so you're talking
beginning of
about
this
just
season.
the beginning of
Yeah,
this. So it's from September to now,
yeah,
basically.
the
Oh,
beginning of the
okay.
season to now. Because I think that like the matches like the Copa del Rey, the Super Copa, that kind of goes back to more at the end of the last season where Barcelona was still wanting to carry, hey, you know what, we want to keep thrashing Madrid. So in this season alone, I think, I would still give them an 8. And I think the reason why is because, like I said, they failed to beat big
Yeah.
teams, but
What would you
they
what would
were
you
able
give
to
them?
recover.
What would you give them if you were to rate them from January of 2025 until December of
Still an
2025? Let's
8.
just say one calendar year. An
I'll
8
still
out of
say
10?
an 8. Yeah, because I
Oh,
mean, I think just real quick, even in January, bro. Yeah, of course they beat Real Madrid twice, but let's fast forward to now. They still lost against they lost 3 important matches in my opinion.
I would give them a 9, bro. I would give them a 9 out of 10.
Yeah,
The reason why is because and I'm just going based from January of 2025 to December of 2025. They were close to winning a treble, really close to winning a treble, in my opinion. Yeah, nobody knows if they would have beat PSG. I don't know.
yeah, of
Um,
course. But they
but
were final.
yeah, but they were pretty close to winning a treble, and I think, and the reason why is because I think like I said, uh, from January of 2025, starting at the beginning of this year, Barca went on a good run of games
Yeah,
where they won. I forget what was the run that they had, but they had a pretty good run of games where they were winning a lot of games, and they were playing good too. You know, and then yeah, if you fast forward towards the end of 2025, that's when you kind of start seeing like, the defects. Obviously Inigo Martinez leaving didn't help Barca's defense. Flick trying to figure out the defense around, injured players as well. Lamine Yamal, Pedri, John Garcia. A lot of the players were injured at the beginning of this season. But I think if I were to rate them from January of 2025, let's say the full calendar year until the end of this year, which is December of 2025, I will give them a 9 out of 10. Now, if it's from the beginning of this season, which is in September of 2025 to now, I would actually give them a 7 out of 10.
yeah,
I would give them a 7 out of 10 and the reason why is because not only did they lose all of their important games, but Barca just like at times, bro, even against small teams in the league, they looked horrible. Even in the
yeah,
Champions League, even in the Champions League against small teams that looked horrible. But that's what I'm saying. So that kind of balances out. Yeah, you could say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 overall, right? From January of 2025 to December of 2025.
but do you think maybe the fact that Barcelona finished first this year, they lead 4 points
Yeah,
at the
that's
end of
true.
this year, you think maybe that can kind of like, give them a little bit, I could say, a better rating in a sense,
Yeah, practically speaking, yeah.
because yeah, they lost, with this new bracket of the Champions League, teams can afford to lose more games, right? We don't want them to,
Yeah.
right? Because I've always said that that's how you pick up momentum, confidence, and rhythm, beating the big teams or even competing against the big teams. I think against PSG, Barcelona competed. I think against
Hmm.
Chelsea, Barcelona, they didn't compete. And I think against Real Madrid, they competed because Real Madrid also didn't trash Real Madrid, Barcelona. And Barcelona, in my opinion, were pretty much at their worst of this season when they
Hmm.
faced Real Madrid. Chelsea, they started kind of recovering a little bit momentum. Um, PSG, the season was just starting. Barcelona had injuries as well. But I mean, at the end of the day, they do lead Real Madrid by 4 points. They finished the league, top of the league. So I mean, I think I'll give them an 8. Yeah, they messed up, but I still think that being first, it's not easy to do because otherwise, in my opinion, Atletico de Madrid will be first. Because let's not
Yeah,
forget that Atletico de Madrid won on a nice run.
that's true. Yeah, they had a nice run, and Atletico
Yeah,
Madrid have not been able to be first in the league, even with this shaky Barca in defense and a Real Madrid that's been horrible. So.
yeah,
It shows you that it's not that easy. I guess we could just finish it off with, next year, what can we look forward to in 2026, right? 2026, we have the whole year, which also, there's a World Cup in the middle of the year, right? For
yeah.
2026. So
Well, it starts in
Um,
June. Yeah, yeah, like mid-year.
yeah, obviously, if you're gonna go from season to season, that the season will end by May. But if you want to go based on, on the whole calendar year for 2026, the World Cup is in the middle too. So
Yeah,
that's gonna be really interesting as well to see how, because that obviously the Spanish national team have a lot of the Barca players. So and,
that, and I'm
and
also excited to see
yeah,
how do you say it? The finalisma, whatever you call it.
Finalissima, I believe it's called.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the one in March with Spain and Argentina, dude.
yeah, Argentina,
I'm excited to
Spain.
see that, dude. Quick question before we end the video. I do want to ask you though, because we're gonna obviously end on the topic of 2026. What do you expect from Barcelona in 2026? Like, what are your expectations? And let's not go based off on last season, bro, because you know what, dude? I don't want to be those Real Madrid fans that say that they have 15 Champions League and that's like the only thing they can go ahead and say. Let's go ahead and talk about this new season, right? Let's speak what's going on. Barcelona 4 points right now. Now, entering 2026, what are your expectations for Barcelona? Do you see them winning a Liga? Do you expect them to win a Liga, the Champions League? What are your expectations?
Well, I think that in 2026, I don't think Barca should struggle in the league too much, to be honest, because if you look at Real Madrid play, bro, if Xavi Alonso stays at Real Madrid, I don't see Real Madrid improving. So I think Barca can get away with the Liga for by the end of next season. The Copa del Rey, yeah, it depends how much Barca really want it, to be honest. In my opinion. But the Champions League, I think, is the big one, dude. The Champions League is the one where, all of us Barca fans, we want Barca to reach another final. I mean, we haven't seen that since 2015. It's going to be 11 years since Barca reached a final of the Champions League. So, of course, I think the one that's going to matter the most is not going to be the Spanish Super Cup in January. It's not going to be the Copa del Rey. It's not going to be the league. It's going to be the Champions League, dude. I think we're not going to judge Barca's season by the end of next season in May, based on how well they do in the Champions League. And of course, they can lose a game in the Champions League. Any team could, right? But I guess it just depends on how they lost it. I would rather have them lose tie the way they did against
PSG.
Inter. Well, no,
Mm,
against Inter last season. I would rather have them lose a tie against the way they did against Inter instead of losing a tie, for example, mm, having a game like they did against Chelsea,
right.
where they
Yeah.
didn't even compete at all, right? So, um, yeah, so I think a lot of us Barca fans are gonna judge Barca season based on the Champions League, in my opinion, dude. So, am I expecting them to win? Probably not, to be honest. If I'm honest with you, I'm not really
Yeah.
expecting them to win it. I'm expecting them to be able to reach the semifinals, bro. I think that they should be able to reach the semifinals, in my opinion, because real quick, if you really think about the the best teams in the world right now, right? You have Arsenal, Bayern Munich, right? Uh, PSG, right? You could throw Chelsea in there because Chelsea, I believe, have the ability to beat any
But Chelsea have
team.
been struggling, bro, since they beat Barcelona in the Champions League. Chelsea kind of went on a decline in their Liga, bro, in their league.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the thing about Chelsea, bro, that they're not
Yeah,
consistent. But in
right.
one but in one tie, I think they can eliminate any team. So you have
Yeah,
Chelsea right there, right? I wouldn't put Liverpool in there, although Liverpool are always going to be there with Real Madrid.
City.
And then I would honestly put the Barca there too. I would put Barca, City, Real Madrid, and Liverpool as the fifth candidates to win the Champions League. So I think Barca should be able to reach, in my opinion, the semifinals if you really think about it. They should be able.
Obviously, I hope so too, bro. I hope that, like you said, even reach the semifinals or the final would be good because I also don't want to see Barcelona kind of repeat the same history, right? That they repeat under Valverde, where it was like Barcelona were really good in the league, right? But they seem to always fail in the Champions League, bro. Because we could kind of go back with games of against Roma and against, for example, Liverpool, of course. Barcelona were like so close, and it's like they failed. But in the Liga, it was just a complete different team. They won back to back leagues, of course. So I hope that that's not the case for Barcelona this time around with Flick, because I do think that it's time for Barcelona to actually win the Champions League, bro. I think the expectations for Barcelona to win the Champions League should be there. And I think that's what even Laporta needs to, kind of build a team around to win the Champions League, bro.
I agree. I agree. So I think a lot of us Barca fans are gonna judge Barca's season based on the Champions League in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's what I think.